Hey guys, what's up? It's Eric with Advanced Level Automotive. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're back here at this car lot, checking out this 2012 Nissan Versa SV. It's got the 1.6 liter 4-cylinder engine in it, and the customer complaint is that the transmission will intermittently start to slip. And so they've already tried replacing the TCM. They tried to do a transmission flush, but a little bit of a backstory on this car. This car was actually flooded during Harvey. And when I say flooded, guys, I mean, they're telling me that this thing had water up to the roof. You guys know how I feel about flood cars. I don't necessarily get too excited when I have to work on them, but for these guys, I figured I'd give it a shot. Anyway, like I said, the car was flooded. They actually gutted the interior. They ripped out the seats, they ripped out the dash. They dried out a lot of components. They ended up replacing a lot of components. They gave me a list. I think they replaced the BCM. They replaced part of the wiring harness. They replaced the instrument cluster. I think they replaced the engine control module because it also got wet. And like I said, they also replaced the TCM after it started having this problem. Now, according to the mechanic, he's pretty sure that the water did not get inside the transmission because they drained the transmission and did not find any signs of water inside of it. So hopefully we're not dealing with some type of mechanical issue inside of the transmission. I'm not really sure, but that's what we're gonna try to figure out today. Anyways, guys, you know how we do it. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing I wanted to show you guys is that when I got here, they already had the engine running. So you can hear it's idling. And the first thing I noticed is that it sounds like it's running pretty good. I mean, the engine is not shaking, it's not vibrating. It sounds pretty healthy. And the other thing that I noticed is that even though this thing was completely underwater, you know, it's really hard to tell. I mean, if you look on the inside, they did a pretty good job of cleaning up the inside, because I can't even tell. I mean, you would never know that this car was completely underwater. Anyway, I got the scan tool over here. I'm gonna go ahead and hook it up. We're gonna do an auto scan, scan all the modules and see what we got. Okay, so we're inside the vehicle. And the first thing that I noticed is that if you look on the instrument cluster, we don't have a check engine light. The only thing that I see is going to be this little airbag light. See it flashing, which wouldn't surprise me because this thing was flooded, so it probably needs an airbag module. But anyway, let's go ahead and do an auto scan, and we're going to scan all of the modules. Sorry if it's difficult to see. I'm gonna let this thing finish scanning, and we're gonna go over this together. Okay guys, so we finished doing the auto scan. Let's go ahead and start at the top. So you can see we have the engine control module. We have 2 fault codes. ABS, we have 4 fault codes. Airbag, we have 7. BCM, we have 11. IPDM, we have 2. Let's go ahead and run a report. We're gonna see what these codes are, starting with the engine control module. Okay, so up here at the top, you can see we have 2 fault codes under the ECM. The first one is going to be this P1564 ASCD switch, which I believe is for the cruise control. And then if you look over here, we have this P0463 fuel level sensor circuit code. Then if you look down here, we have the ABS. And again, we have 4 fault codes in the ABS. First one is going to be a C1105 rear right hand sensor, and then a C1106 rear left hand sensor. I believe those are the wheel speed sensors. And then we have a U1000, which is a CAN communication circuit code. And we have the C1115 ABS abnormal signal. So we have quite a few codes there. Of course, we have the airbag system. And it says here, control unit, control unit, control unit. We're not really going to worry too much about the airbag system. It's probably disabled because, again, this vehicle was flooded. So it's going to need all of the components replaced more than likely. So we're going to look at these codes. We're going to keep them in the back of our mind, but we're not going to focus too much on these. And then we look at the BCM here. You can see we have 11 codes. And the first one is going to be a U1000 CAN communication circuit, a B2193 chain of BCM to ECM. And we have a C1704, which is a low pressure. I believe that's for the tire pressure. Then we have a bunch of codes here for no data. I believe these may be related to the tire pressure sensors. I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to look at these codes, but I believe that's what that's for. Then we have this C1735 ignition circuit open. And then under the IPDM, we have 2 codes. First one is going to be a U1000 CAN communication circuit. Then we have this B2098 ignition relay on circuit. Okay, so looking at all of these codes, I mean, it's really important to look at the codes, but at this point, I don't see anything that's leading me toward a definite fault. I mean, it's possible that we could have some type of CAN communication failure, but at this point, I'm not really sure if this tells us anything that's going on. I think the first thing I want to do is go ahead and take the vehicle for a test drive, and I want to see what they're complaining about. All right, so we're on our test drive, and the first thing I noticed is that if you look at the steering wheel, we're going straight right now, and the steering wheel is like way off. Now, I don't know if that's going to affect anything, but that's just the first thing that I noticed. Anyway, this thing seems to be driving fine. I mean, if you look at the instrument cluster, I don't show any warning lights, no check engine light, no ABS light or traction control light or anything like that. But I mean, right now everything's working fine. I'm going to go ahead and punch it, see if the transmission shifts. Yeah, that feels pretty good for a little 4-cylinder. As you can see, the transmission is shifting just fine. So right now I don't see any problem with the way the vehicle is driving. I guess let me just drive it around for a little bit and see what happens. Okay guys, so I've been driving for about 20 minutes or so, and it seems like the vehicle just started acting up. Now, it almost felt like this thing was going into a limp home mode. There it goes. It's doing it again. So I don't know if you guys can tell. Look, whoa. Seems like the transmission is neutralizing. Okay. Now it doesn't let me go anywhere. Okay, let me find somewhere to pull in real quick. Oh man, I'm not trying to pull into a repair shop with that. Going over here. Okay guys, so I managed to pull into this parking lot. This thing pretty much went into full-blown limp home mode. And what I mean by that is that I had my foot on the accelerator all the way to the floor, and this thing wouldn't go more than 20 miles an hour. Now, I'm pretty familiar with Nissans. I used to work at Nissan. I'm a Nissan tech. And so limp home mode is something I'm very familiar with. Now, there's a number of different reasons why you could be going into limp home mode. Number one could be an issue with the transmission. Sometimes when these CVTs overheat, it can cause the computer to go into a limp home mode. Also, if you have a problem with the ECT system or the electronic throttle body control system, this can also cause it to go into limp home mode. So let's say we have a faulty throttle position sensor, or a faulty pedal position sensor, or a faulty throttle body itself, you know, that can cause this thing to go into limp home mode. I've even seen instances where overheating, an engine overheating condition, can cause it to go into limp mode. Now, I know that's not the case here because I can see the temperature gauge here. It's about halfway, so I really don't think that's a problem. Now, the other thing that I noticed is that we still don't have a check engine light present. Normally with some type of fault like this, we would have a trouble code that'll show us a check engine light. In this case, we still don't have a check engine light, nor do I see like an ABS light or a traction control light. None of that is lit. The only thing that I can tell you right now is that if you look at the DTE, which is a distance to empty, it was saying we were at like 28 miles till empty, but if you look right now, it's just showing dashes, almost like it's not communicating. So, I mean, I know the fuel level is getting pretty low, but it should still have a number. It shouldn't go from 28 all the way to nothing, and if it goes to nothing, it should at least show like a number 0 there. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it, but at this point, I'm gonna try to get this vehicle back to the shop so we can finish doing our checks. All right, guys, so I made it back to the shop, and I went ahead and I ran an auto scan with the scan tool. So I wanted to see if we had any other codes that were popping up, some codes that we may not have seen before. So you can see we actually do have a few other codes. I'm gonna go ahead and run a report, show you guys the codes that popped up. Of course, we're still gonna have the same ones that we had there before, but there's gonna be a couple of new ones. So if you look over here under the engine computer, this air fuel ratio sensor, bank 1 P2A00, we did not have this code before. Now we still have the other two codes, the ASCD switch and the fuel level sensor circuit, which this kind of makes sense now, because if you guys remember the issue that we were having with the distance to empty on the instrument cluster, this PO463 might be related to it. But anyway, like I said, this P2A00, that code was not there before. It's there now. If we scroll down to the ABS, this right here, C1116 stop lamp switch, I don't recall seeing that there before, but it's there now. Of course, we still have the other codes that we had. And I think that if we go down, let's see here. Well, nope, there's no other codes here, but I guess what I'm interested in is looking at the transmission control module, because if you guys look over here, it's showing that we have no fault codes. Now, I mentioned to you guys that a lot of times when these things go into limp home mode, it can be due to overheating transmission. And one of the quick ways to check is to go into the transmission control unit, and we're going to look for a data PID labeled CVT-A and CVT-B. So if we go into the live data, let's go into the all signals. I'm going to scroll down, and we're going to look for our CVT-A and our CVT-B. And those CVT counts are what they're telling us to look for in the case that we have an overheating transmission. So if you look here, we have CVT-B and CVT-A. And I know because I used to do a lot of these transmissions at Nissan, and according to the bulletin, the first thing they wanted us to check were the CVT-A and B counts. And they said if the count was greater than 1, then more than likely that's what we're dealing with. But if you look here at CVT-A and CVT-B, we're showing 0 on both of these. So it doesn't look like we have a problem with the transmission overheating. And like I said, guys, this is a real common problem. There's a technical service bulletin about it. And one of the things they want you to do is to add an additional cooler for the transmission. But in this case, it doesn't look like we're dealing with that. And like I said, if we go into the TCM, we're not showing any trouble codes. Again, if we had a problem here, more than likely we would show some type of trouble code. So right now, I'm not really sure what to think. I mean, is it possible that we're intermittently losing communication with one of the control modules? And like I said, guys, I really don't see any codes here that stick out to me, or at least any codes that would indicate why we're going into limp home mode. But I think one of the first things I want to try to do is a very simple clear the codes, drive it again, and see what comes back first. I mean, I know that's not the best way to do this, but at this point, I'm just trying to keep my mind open to the possibilities here. And it probably is like the next easiest thing that we can do. So I'm going to run this auto scan once again, and I'm going to clear all of the codes. We'll drive it around again, and then we'll see what codes come back. Okay, so I cleared all the codes, and then I went ahead and I ran an auto scan just to see if we had any hard faults that were going to come back immediately before we even went on the test drive. So you can see we do have one hard fault in the ECM. I'm going to go ahead and hit report. We're going to see what that hard fault is. All right, here's the engine computer. And as you can see, the code that we still have is going to be the P1564 ASCD switch. Now, this code is real common with these Nissans. It has to do with the cruise control switch. A lot of times you can have a problem with the bad switch, or sometimes an issue with the spiral cable. We're not going to worry about that. Like I said, I went ahead and cleared all of the codes. This is the only one that comes back immediately. So there must be some type of hard fault with that, but that's not going to cause the issues that we're having. At least I don't think so. So let me go ahead and go for another test drive, try to get this thing to act up, and we'll see what other codes come back. All right, let me apologize. I know I keep adding things, but there's just one more thing I wanted to add. Only because I want to try to gather as much information as I can when I go on this test drive. So let me show you guys what setup I have. So over here I have my lap scope, and I'm using this little breakout box right here. It is connected to the DLC connector down here. And as you can see, I have my leads for my channel 1 and channel 2 on pins 6 and 14. Those are for the CAN communication lines, CAN high and CAN low. And then also I have my ground on pin 4, which is the ground for the connector. And then at the same time, I have this J-box hooked up for my Autel and my scan tool connected. So now the thing about this, having the scan tool connected, you guys need to understand that while this thing is connected, as long as we're not attempting to communicate or extract information from any of the modules on the vehicle, this thing is not going to affect the CAN bus communication signal. So if you look at the screen that I have right now, as you can see, we're not inside of any of the modules. It isn't until we try to go into a module and try to communicate, or if we try to pull any live data, then we're going to have information being extracted from the module or shared between the scan tool and the computer module. That's going to affect the CAN bus signal. So like I said, I have this connected here, but it's not going to affect our signal. Now if we look over here, at the lab scope, you can see we have our can high and can low. And as you can see right now, everything looks pretty good. I mean, we're showing about 2.5 volts on both channels. And as you can see, we have a nice mirrored image, which is exactly what we want to see. We want to see that when one channel goes up, the other channel is going down. Now, the reason that I'm monitoring the CAN bus communication system is because I want to see what happens whenever the vehicle starts to act up, whenever we go into limp mode. I want to see whether or not we're having a problem with the CAN bus communication signal. So we're going to be looking for things like glitches or dropouts in the signal. So I'm trying to keep an open mind. Again, we have the lab scope, we have the scan tool, and what we're going to do is whenever the vehicle starts to act up again, whenever we go back into limp mode, we're going to check out the CAN signal. We're going to see if we have any glitches or dropouts. And then at the same time, we're going to go back to the scan tool. We're going to see if we have any modules that are not communicating. So anyways, that's my plan of attack. Let me go ahead and get on the road and get started with this test drive. Okay guys, so I've been driving for about half an hour now, and it looks like this thing just started acting up. Let me show you on the instrument cluster. The first thing I noticed is that if you look, we have our traction control light on. Little traction control light is illuminated. Now, it did start raining, which kind of sucks because I'm just now learning that these wiper blades don't work. So these wipers don't work at all. Well, there it goes. For just a second it works. But yeah, so the wipers don't work. Or sometimes they work, I guess. They're working now. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it that way. Anyway, so the wipers are intermittently working. The other thing is that the turn signals. Are you kidding me? The turn signals have not been working this whole time. And now that I'm trying to show you guys, the turn signals are working. Well, there goes an officer. He might have been confused by me using my turn signal light. Yeah, okay, that's just the strangest thing, man. So the whole time I've been driving this thing, the wiper blades haven't been working, the turn signals weren't working, the hazard lights were not working. All of a sudden, the traction control light comes on. I want to show you guys this, and everything starts working again. So anyway, right now it's driving normal again, and when it was acting up again, it felt like the transmission was starting to neutralize, and then it felt like it went into limp mode for a moment, where I had my foot on the accelerator all the way to the floor, yet it really didn't want to get up and go. And I looked over at, oh, there it goes. You guys see that? Now it's doing it. Look, I've got my foot all the way to the floor. Doesn't want to go. Look over at the CAN signal. CAN signal looks normal. I don't see any glitches or any dropouts. It's like it's intermittently doing this, because now it's going, well, there it goes again. Whoa, okay. Yeah, so you guys see that? It's like the transmission is, look at that. Now it's totally neutralized. Now I can't, okay. Feels like it's just slipping real bad. Let me see if I can turn the hazard lights on. Look at that, the hazard light's not working. Okay, so I'm gonna try to pull in somewhere, get off of the road. Well, look, the hazard lights are working now. Oh man, this thing is gonna be a lot more of a headache than, well, shoot. Holy crap, okay. Let me try to make it into a parking lot here. Oh man, the light's green and this thing does not want to move. I've got my foot all the way to the floor right now, and the car barely wants to move. I'm going like 10 miles an hour. I'm gonna try to pull into this parking lot over here. It looks like we're definitely in limp mode now. Let me find somewhere to park here. Okay, we made it to a safe spot. Right now the vehicle is completely in limp mode. As you can see, I can put my foot on the accelerator all the way to the floor, and look, this thing barely wants to move. So it is in limp mode. Now look over at the CAN communication signal. Again, this signal looks nice and clean. I didn't see any dropouts or glitches whenever this problem was happening. Now, the next thing I want to do real quick is check to see if we have any modules that are not communicating. Let's go ahead and move into the auto scan. This is going to scan all of the modules on the vehicle. We're going to see if it's going to skip over any. So we have the engine control module. It's reading fault codes there, so we know we have communication. ABS, we have communication. The meter, we have communication. BCM, communication, airbag, communication, transmission communication. Let's check the IPDM. We have communication there. This thing is done scanning, and it looks like we have communication all the way across the board. Now, one thing I will say is that we have plenty more fault codes here that we didn't have before. So now if you look at the engine control module, we have 6 fault codes. Let's go ahead and run a report, check all these fault codes and see what they are. Okay, so I just went ahead and put it on the seat over here, get it out of the way of the sun. Now we can read our fault code starting at the top. You can see we have a P1564. That's the same code that we had before. We're not going to worry about that. We also have a P1574 ASCD vehicle speed sensor. That might actually be related to this code. Okay, we're going to keep that in the back of our mind. Move over, we have a PO500 vehicle speed sensor A. We have a P1720 vehicle speed sensor automatic transmission out. And then we have a couple codes here for the oxygen sensors, bank 1, PO139 and a PO137. Now if we look at the transmission, we have 2 fault codes, PO720 output speed sensor, and then we have P2859 clutch A pressure. So at least now we're showing a couple codes here for the transmission. This does give us some direction. Let's move on to the ABS. You'll see we have this C1143 steering angle sensor circuit. Again, the steering wheel is way off on this thing, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's why we have this code. So moving down, again, the airbag. We have a bunch of codes for the airbag. And then moving on to the BCM. Looks like we have some trouble codes for no data. C1708, C1709, C1710, and a C1711. Now again, the vehicle is in limp mode. Let me try to put this thing into reverse. I'm gonna accelerate. I've got my foot to the floor and this thing barely wants to move. I'm gonna go into drive, go forward, my foot all the way to the floor, and this thing does not barely want to move. I'm gonna go ahead and shift it into park, and what I want to see is whether or not shutting the vehicle off and starting it back up allows us to go back into driving normal. So let me get the key in there, turn it on, start it up, and let's see what happens when I put it into reverse. See if we go back to driving normal. Yep. So this is definitely a limp mode. I put it into drive, accelerate, check that out. We're moving normal now. So yeah, just shutting the vehicle off and starting it back up whenever it goes into limp mode allows the computer to reset, and that lets you go back into driving normal. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to get the vehicle back over to the shop and try to figure out what our next step is. Okay, so check this out. I wasn't able to even make it down the street before this thing went back into limp mode. And if you look over here, we have a check engine light now, which we didn't have a check engine light before. Again, I don't know. This thing's got all kinds of crazy electrical issues. Sometimes we see lights, sometimes we don't. But anyway, now I see a check engine light. So I pulled into this parking lot over here, and I ran an auto scan on it again. And if you look, we have a new code under the engine computer. I don't know if you guys can see that. A P1715 says input pulley speed. I believe that's related to the transmission. So that P1715 code was not there before. It's there now. So I mean, this thing right now to me is looking more and more like some type of connection issue. Again, this car was underwater, and when I say it was underwater, I mean the water was up to the roof. So I'm worried about corrosion in the connectors, in the wiring harnesses, things like that. And I mean, this could be in multiple places because, again, it's not only the issue that we have it going into limp mode. You know, we have issues where the wiper blades are not working, the turn signals are not working, and that stuff is intermittent. So to me, it definitely feels like we might be dealing with some issues as far as bad connections. And I mean, that's just what I'm thinking because, again, guys, like, we're having these random codes pop up. You know, some of these codes weren't even there before. And then earlier we had some type of air fuel ratio sensor code. That code is no longer popping up. Now we have some other O2 sensor codes. And, you know, these codes are just kind of random and erratic. So to me, I really feel like there's some connection issue somewhere. I think we need to get this thing back to the shop, start disconnecting the wiring harnesses, seeing if we can find corrosion, and then go from there. All right, so we managed to make it back to the shop. Now, moving under the hood, there's a few things that I want to check. Of course, whenever you're dealing with multiple electrical problems, there's a few things that you want to do, some very basic checks. Number one, we want to check all of the grounds, all of the body grounds. We want to check the block grounds, the battery grounds. We want to make sure that we don't have any loose grounds, any corrosion, something like that that could be causing our electrical system to go haywire. Again, we're here under the hood. A few of the grounds that we want to check. If you look over here on the side of the fender, we have this ground here. Now, the ground is nice and tight. There's a little bit of oxidation on it, not too much, but it's probably a good rule of thumb to go ahead and clean it off anyway. We move over here to this side. We have a body ground here. As you can see, this ground goes from the body to the block. And again, this ground is nice and tight on both ends. I don't see any excessive corrosion. And again, it's probably a good idea. We're gonna go ahead and clean these up anyway. And if we look over here on this side, you'll see that we have another ground on the body. And again, these are multiple grounds on this one terminal connection. And again, this ground is nice and tight. It's not loose. And I do see a little bit of oxidation on here. So again, this one, we're gonna wanna go ahead and clean it up. Now, if we move over to the battery, of course, you wanna check to make sure that both battery terminals are nice and tight. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to move these. So you can see they're nice and tight. We don't have any corrosion on the battery terminals. And this main negative battery cable goes down to the side of the transmission. So we're gonna wanna go down there and check that connection as well. Now, while we're here, I want to point out to you guys the TCM. This is the transmission control module located right here in front of the battery. And again, like I said, they already replaced this transmission control module. It did not fix the problem, but I wanted to go in here and check the connector. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect it. I'm going to squeeze this clip and pull up on it. Ow. Okay, let's go ahead and open this thing up. Now, what we want to check for is going to be any signs of corrosion, any signs of moisture. Again, this vehicle was flooded, so we're going to be looking for some green crusties. Now, I don't know about you guys, but looking at this connector, it actually looks pretty clean. Doesn't look like we have any water damage, so I'm going to reconnect that. Now, one of the other connectors that we're going to want to focus on is going to be the main connector at the transmission, because of course, you guys recall, we have some transmission codes popping up. One of the things we're going to want to do is go down to the CVT transmission. We're going to want to disconnect the connector, check it, make sure we don't have any corrosion. Now, the only problem with this is that I'm going to have to jack up the vehicle, remove this wheel, because we're going to have to pull this fender liner out. Well, before we do that, there is one more thing that we can check while we're here, and that's going to be the IPDM, which is underneath this cover here. And again, the IPDM is like a fuse box, but it's also a computer module. And I guess my question is whether or not they replaced the IPDM, because again, we're also having issues with the wiper blades not working and the turn signals cutting in and out. So all of that stuff is controlled through the IPDM. It wouldn't surprise me if this thing got full of water and maybe corroded some of the connectors. So let me go ahead and pull this IPDM out. I've got my little pick tools here. I'm going to use these to open up the clips here on the side. Let's see if I can pull this out. Well, that's what happens when you only use one hand. It did sound like that other one hit the ground though. Let me get down here and check. Yep, there you are. Gotcha. All right, so now that we have this thing unclipped, we can go ahead and pull it out like so and take a close look at this thing. Oh, actually, check that out. Let's try to focus in on that. Okay. Check out this connector. It actually looks kind of green on the outside. Let me disconnect this thing. Again, I'm going to use my pick tool. Just going to go ahead and pry this thing open. There we go. Well, check that out. What is that? Let's see if I can focus in. There we go. Oh yeah, check that out. This thing has got some oxidation in it. Actually, it looks like it's still wet. Oh, hey, look in there. Okay, let me disconnect this one over here. Oh yeah, check that out. This thing is still wet. I don't think they replaced this IPDM. Yep, take a look in there. There's moisture. Definitely looks like this thing needs to be replaced. because it looks like it wasn't replaced after the vehicle was flooded. Take a look at that little fuse right there. That thing looks like it melted. See that? Either it melted or somebody crushed it with a pair of pliers. But yeah, anyways, this thing is definitely going to need to get replaced. Now, I don't know if this is what's causing the vehicle to go into limp mode. I mean, it is possible because this IPDM is tied into the CAN communication system, so it's possible that it could be causing some communication issues. We're definitely going to have to replace this, but I still want to check the connector at the transmission, make sure that we don't have any oxidation there. Well, let's go ahead and take a look inside of here while we're here, and look at these fuses, make sure that none of them are blown. I mean, I don't see any blown fuses, but these connectors all probably have corrosion in them, so they're probably going to need to get cleaned out anyway. Disconnect this here. Disconnect that. Take a look inside. Well, I see a little bit of green crusties, not too much. So yeah, we'll clean that up and replace this IPDM. All right, guys, so I've got the wheel removed. Let me show you behind this plastic cover here. If you look right over here, first of all, you see this black and yellow cable? That is going to be the ground cable. Let me try to focus in on that. Right there. If you see that black and yellow cable, that's going to be the ground that comes from the battery, attaches itself to the transmission. And as you can see, I mean, there's a little bit of oxidation, not too bad, but the ground is nice and tight. If you look right above it, you'll see that gray connector. That's going to be the main connector at the transmission. Again, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect it. We're going to want to verify that we don't have any corrosion. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Just going to stick my arm in here. Try to grab this connector and twist it. Okay, there we go. Now let's take a look inside of this connector. It's actually really difficult to see the pins because it's got this white plastic piece. So let me try to pop this off, see if we can get a good look inside. All right, guys, so I managed to pop off this white piece just using a pick tool. I'm sorry I couldn't show that to you because I needed 2 hands to do that. Anyway, looking inside the connector, I mean, I actually don't see any corrosion, no green crusties, or any real signs of moisture. Honestly, the pins look pretty good to me. I don't know, it might be worth it to do maybe a pin drag check. All right, so I just got done doing the pin fitment check, and all of these pins look good, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this back together, reconnect it. All right, guys, so we are back. As you can see right here in my hand, I have the old IPDM. The new one, or excuse me, the used replacement is already installed. The guys went ahead and replaced it for me. And they also went ahead and cleaned up the connectors, made sure that we got rid of all that crud, and we're good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this car for a test drive, and let's see what happens. All right, guys, so I've been on the road driving for about 45 minutes now, and that's straight driving. I mean, I hadn't stopped, just been driving, cruising, and the vehicle has not acted up. Everything's running really good so far. At this point, I think that the IPDM probably fixed our issue as far as the limp mode problem. Now, we do still have some other problems. The turn signal lights are still not working, or at least the indicators are not showing up on the instrument panel here. But that's gonna be for another time. For now, we're gonna call this a fix. I'm gonna go ahead and drive this thing back to the shop, and we'll continue from there. Anyways, guys, I'm gonna end off the video here. I know this wasn't the most scientific method toward figuring out what was wrong. Sometimes when you're dealing with flood vehicles, you know, you might just have to do a little bit of guesswork, but in this case, it turned out that the IPDM was where our problem was. Again, we still have some other electrical faults that we have to deal with. I'm probably gonna make some videos on that. We're just gonna have to fix this car kind of little by little, but anyways, guys, like I always say, I hope you found the video useful. I hope you found it informational. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.